And it is now time for our wonderful poet extraordinaire, Aleysa Wise.
You've been borrowing me for so long. I forgot to demand myself back. Demand my sight, demand my joy, demand my reparations. I was caught somewhere between freedom and not really being free. I found me sinking in a university lecture hall, feeling all mama, I made it. All hands raised, eager, submissive, begging for a seat at a table I sat. This is no longer a request to build me a home. I am woman. Yes, I have died so much before I have died. I have come back the hammer. I am building myself into a home. I think of my nieces. I think of someone telling them the greatest lesson in life is your body is a temple, and how that usually translates to your body is not yours. The eldest and I crack jokes. She calls me the auntie who preaches, and that's fine. I want to show them how girl is more than just sanctuary. She is the gospel. Step to your own pulpit and preach. This ain't a request to enter your house. I am Black woman. Yes, I have died so much before I have died. I have come back the key. What is permission when you have built it? I think of my nephew, how Black woman raises Black boy. I think the more the Black boy grows, the less people pay attention to his stories. I watch him bloom into a flower. I watch him begin to correlate flower with girly thing. I watch how he becomes afraid of himself in a world that is afraid of him, and I fear a day when he may violently beg for his body back. Do not request to live, nephew. Demand to be alive, to not cower in the center of a garden, but instead create yourself a crown out of the roses. I am auntie, I am woman, I am Black, I am queer Black woman, and I have died, and we have died, and we have died so much they thought we were dead. I think of America, how they tell us to leave if we don't like it, but those are our fingerprints on the wall and the bones of the natives beneath the carpet, and those are now our legislative signatures, and this is now my Camden, New Jersey dialect teaching your children America. We are no longer asking for permission. You are writing us a check made out to the years of silence, how it has entered us, forced its way onto our tongues, became our narratives we have never authored. I know how it can bleach a map, so I am writing our way home. I know how it readies our fists, makes them heavy and justified. Thank you.
All right, let's get back into the conversation about the future. The question I want to ask is an Audre Lorde question. Can we dismantle the master's house with the master's tools?
Well, I don't think we as people are going to be able to obtain the liberation if we use the same tools that the oppressor has been using on us.
That's the question.
Right?
Were you saying that and speaking English, by the way?
When I'm saying
you're saying that speaking English. This tool that we have, no.
She said, I can say it in Spanish.
Even the words that we use, whether it's Latin or any derivative, how could you even say that speaking?
Because we haven't dismantled the master's house yet.
No, I don't think it's about dismantling the master's house. It's about creating a new house. Yeah. Why you want to take apart a house? You just got to inspire and dream up a new world. We ain't trying, it's white waste energy trying to dismantle somebody else's shit. Why are we even broadcasting this on the master's freaking platform?
It misunderstands the difference between the visioning piece of what we're talking about and the pragmatic piece of how to navigate our way to get there. So I work on climate issues all the time, right? And there's always some asshole in the audience who's like, didn't you fly to get here? And if you think me not flying is the solution to climate change, you deeply misunderstand the scale, place, and implications of the problem.
We know all of the issues. We know what's happening. We know because we're right there and we live it and we experience it and we're fighting for it, right? Or fighting through it or fighting against it. But how can we get to the other side? Are we going to be able to reinvent by dismantling this bullshit society that we have, that has been created, and for us to dream a new world, right? How can we actually get there?
It's just like nurturing the ecosystem. So if me and you are trying to make a change, but you got nobody in here believes that that can happen, something needs to change, whereas we're working together to kind of expand that network of change. So it's well, I'm not even gonna jump into a big conversation, but time banking is a model, whereas if you don't have anything, you can offer your time in exchange for other things, whereas other people have exchanges that they can provide you with for their time. And so I think that's a very ground level playing field, whereas we all have the same exact amount of time. It's just how we tend to use it in the environment, and then how we use it and how we give our time to people. And so I think looking at that and then going back to the ecosystem is saying, well, if we're all on this couch, how can we benefit each other with the time that we have that isn't taxing to us at the end of the day and allows us to still thrive individually and collectively?
We have to live into the world we want. Like, the future arrives unevenly. One of the things we say at Movement Generation is, what the hands do, the heart learns. If all we do is fight against what we don't want, we will learn to love the fight, and we will have nothing left for our vision but longing. And longing isn't good enough. The idea of we have to actually create the world we want, live into it, and provoke a crisis over who has the right and responsibility to define our economies and govern our communities. We tend to live in a world where people either fetishize technology, particularly quote-unquote high technology, which I have a disagreement with. Like, for example, if connections between people is the problem we're trying to solve, you know, Facebook is not a high technology, it's extremely low technology. A hug is an extremely high technology. Like, it's just a tool to solve a problem, and being clear on the problem you're trying to solve really matters here. And then there's tech neutral, which is this idea that a hammer is just a tool and you can bash somebody's brain in, or you can build a house with it, and it matters what you do with the tool. And that's where most people sit, the idea that technology is neutral. I don't see it that way, and most of the folks I work with don't see it that way. They see technology as the embodiment of relationships of power and resources over time and space. Like, what matters is whose tree was felled to make the handle for the hammer, whose labor was exploited, how did it get there, what are the relationships of power, how does it end up in somebody's hand in the first place, and what happens to it at the end of its life. So, like, we can talk about potential liberatory aspects of commandeering blockchain, but every Bitcoin transaction takes enough energy to power a large American home for 2 weeks. I'm sorry, but we cannot live that way on planet Earth. And that requires the extraction of wealth and resources from other people, from mostly poor Black and brown bodies here and all over the world. And it requires the disabling of bodies, right? Because people are not disabled. People are made disabled by our inability to create access.
I was in Congo 7 years ago, and I could not go back again now. And I was trying to figure out what it was, why it was so difficult with all of the access points, the communities we worked there, the people we do, like, didn't make any sense that we were able to go 50 of us before, and we couldn't, any of us, over 4 weeks get a visa to go. Why is it worse there now? While Sierra Leone, going back there, was better, even after Ebola. You know, going to Liberia, all these other places, even though they're really hard hit with all these, and then I walked around in Liberia and Sierra Leone and Ghana, and everyone had cell phones. And I was like, oh, right, got it. Because the coltan and the tin and the tungsten that's coming out of the Congo is now not only being exploited and extracted for Europe and Asia and the Americas, it's now also being exploited by the entire continent of Africa. And so there's a massive disconnect, so that now that we're getting access to this education, access to these tools, there's very little discussion of the fact that you're doing that over bodies of women and whole communities of their brethren, literal next door brethren, let alone from the cradle of all of our civilization.
I'm wholeheartedly with you, because I come from a place of social entrepreneurship. So at the end of the day, if we're using technology, is it setting us forward or is it setting us backwards? So like we were talking about, is viewing it from a sense of circular economics, whereas now there is no such thing as waste. So now, before we even create this thing, we're already thinking about how we can use this byproduct as a resource for something else to move forward. And with resources that are modular, you know, so that you can take one piece out and don't have to waste the whole thing, but now you can replace one part, and now that one piece can then be recycled. But just thinking about that before we create things that will become waste or can become waste.
We can't undo yesterday. I wish we could. I wish we could go back and redesign. I wish we had the tools to be able to do that. But unfortunately, we have the tools to design tomorrow. And our conversation is about the future. 10 years ago, what's an app? Because 10 years ago, there weren't apps. If someone said, yo, apps, bro, we're gonna have this app, a car's gonna show up, I'm gonna have a taxi just like freaking like, you know, all the rich people in Beverly Hills have a black car pick me up everywhere. It's in the, you couldn't even imagine that. That's reality today. It's the democratization of everything possible. Yo, I want a house everywhere I go.
The app isn't the thing that democratizes, it's the wealth that needs to get democratized.
No. What I'm saying, solving problems needs to be democratized. And giving the power to people to solve their own problems, and that is what I'm saying.
But also recognizing that we're not going to get to that point where we can really innovate and go, how can we get to a circular society if we don't recognize that we're living in a linear one that is perpetuating this idea of cradle to grave, and that we really need to not innovate even anything new, but actually go back to what we've already known and what has allowed us to survive and thrive up until this point. The reason why we still live here is because of those ancestors who knew you got to grow your food. You got to drink water. You need sleep. Like those different things. And that going back to that ancient technology that is cradle to cradle.
Okay, so I have a lot more I could say about that, but it's not my turn. It's your turn.
If I was in an accident, I was paralyzed, and they said I'd never walk again. And when I'm in that moment, when I can't eat or walk, or your medical needs aren't met, I'm not thinking about creating that next technology thing. When my mom has cancer and she can't, pay for her medical bills and she's dying from the chemotherapy because we don't think of healthy or alternatives because, when your basic needs aren't met, it's hard to have the vision to do that. So what would you guys say with medical, with the elderly, with our food supply, with profits being in medical, hospital, prisons, and education? If those needs aren't met, it's hard to create that vision.
We absolutely do need to commandeer the resources that are enclosed in the existing system. The corrupt, capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal bullshit. We have to, so we need to fight to get that back. So there's resistance there. But then we also have to actually meet the real needs of people in a way that models a better way to do it. So one of my comrades, Carla, has part of a healing clinic collective that puts on free healing clinics for people in the community that bring together healers from all these different traditions and provide free healthcare to people who don't have access to healthcare. There's folks who are working on transformative justice, like alternatives to policing in prison because humans do not belong in cages. If we do not believe that humans belong in cages, then what are we doing to address harm and hurting in our community that actually meets the needs of people to have harm and hurting addressed? We talk about the techno fix, the technology fix, and the techno fix, TEK, traditional ecological knowledge fix. How do we remember our way forward? How do we actually lean into our cultures and our ancestors and our history and our upbringing? And they're like part of the cognitive concrete that paves over our imagination that colonialism is this idea that we're just all individuals and we're going to do it alone, right? And so, we need to liberate ourselves from that notion and see ourselves as embedded deeply in communities. And when you do that and you start to meet your needs, you become permanently organized communities. And when you are a permanently organized community, then you can mount a revolution.
Something that I'm very interested in and that I've seen just for myself that works a lot is transforming through ego, because a natural human tendency is to always build up, is to up level. And so that's how I got to Bitcoin, and that's how I got to, oh wow, like this is a new way, a new economy, oh my God. And then that's how I got to thinking about solutions. It reminds me of what Tai Lopez does. He's appealing to inner city kids about check out my cars, this is awesome. And so it's people who might not see a problem and they're like, check out all these cars, check out my house. But then what he's pitching also is kind of educational too.
This is a capitalistic way of thinking, right? Rather than just let's show our children what humanity is. Why can't we have people see humanity in other people? I think that could be the key.
Aspiration is good, but that's still talking about hope and dreams and future thinking. But if it's still sort of built with this idea of that your ego has to be a part of what that's still thinking of self. And what we're trying to talk about is community. Like this whole idea of picking yourself up by your bootstraps, but you're not recognizing those bootstraps are made in Mexico. Like if we're not like, we are mostly not human. We are mostly bacteria and a bunch of other stuff working. Like the ecosystem that is the planet is the ecosystem of our bodies, and we don't even recognize that me is actually we, right here. And so like if we're not pushing ourselves to have the we conversation, then we're not gonna see each other. That still doesn't address that problem of ignorance. It still is causing that person to have to look at that commercial, have to look at Ty, and by themselves, through their own ego, come to it. And we're going, how do we truly break through that and speak into their listening when they're not just wanting?
And it's organizing.
It's more bubble mentality where there's so much information on your smartphone that we don't even use the phone to the power that you could use it for. So you can go to your niece, next door neighbor if you don't have a niece, and inspire them to use their phone in a better way, to go out and get the information that can transform their life. It's there. And then the answers to our problems are there. You just gotta just be a little bit more disciplined, have a little bit more realistic timeline on when you want to see the results. And more importantly, just dedicate yourself to be a part of the us, the we. And if you don't have kids, which I don't, how do I protect things that are not connected to me blood, and now they're not things, they're family? My grandma said, go out in the world and turn strangers into friends and friends into family. Well, there you have no enemy. And you have this longing to make sure everyone's okay. And if we all could behave that way, we wouldn't be having the conversations of, taking resources where people live to be able to prosper over here on the other side of the world. We're gonna be a little bit more conscious about the things that we do as a collective. I started my school in East LA, where I'm from, Boyle Heights. And I surrounded, 65 kids with robotic skills, computer science, and Esri GIS skills. And these were kids that were in and out of juvenile hall, always ditching, low performing. To tell a kid, hey, discipline yourself in school, they're like, yo, I could make money selling drugs, bro. Okay, well then turn in your grades and there'll be rewards with grades. I'll treat your grades as a currency. So our kids turn in grades and there's things for them to do, because you're really fighting with the drug dealers. The drug dealers are not looking at a 12-year-old, they're looking early at 9 now. So you're competing business with future business, because they have a business for them right now. So that's reality. What can I do creatively to spark a fire so they can apply themselves right now and see this future that they wouldn't have seen otherwise, because they're paying attention to their nightmare. Now, how can I get them to pay attention to a dream? And the way you do that is by turning strangers into friends and friends into family, because a family will give you that backbone to be like, you know what, I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna worry about my reality right now. I'm gonna focus on this dream. And not everybody has that family net.
But I think what was so successful in the Standing Rock movement, for example, was that people were standing up for what they wanted and focusing on the solution, like being a water protector rather than against the pipeline. And I find that love actually raises that vibration, and returning to ancestral things like the body, nurturing the body with good food. Communication skills, that's not taught in school. We all want the same thing, love. And how can we raise that frequency so that we can show up with more loving presence to everything that we do? And instead of being met with resistance, be able to transcend energy and make true change.
I want to speak on a personal level about the issue you just brought up, the importance of sort of self-preservation, if you will, right? That which in turns, in some ways translates the people that you work with, right? I have the privilege to be around working for close to 20 years, and my work is exhausting, right? Exhausting in many different ways. But what has helped me is to really be grounded and to understand that I do have a higher power that guides me and supports me. And that I have a purpose, right? Because for the majority part of my life, I was lost in drugs, prison, homelessness, sex work, like on the streets, and all of that, right? Which is the same experiences that many trans women particularly experience today. And what has helped me really is to be connected to what's inside of me, right? In other words, my God, right? And also, you know, try to take care of myself. I get massages every 2 weeks. You know, like I drink my tea, you know what I mean? Like before I go to bed, I drink, the first thing that I do when I open my eyes is drink a bottle of water or a glass of water, you know? That's sort of like for me is cleansing, and then obviously connecting to, and ask for support, you know, which again, then it helps me to be grounded and helps me to not forget where I come from.
Love is not the opposite of fighting necessarily, right? It is my love for Bamby that will make me fight against transphobia, right? Those two things connect. And at the same time, because I love Bamby and want to make more space for Bamby to be able to love, then I'm going to be fighting against those who are trying to oppress her, and vice versa, right? So when one of us is weak, the other is fighting for, so that there's all of these things that connect. Ideally, we all then find the places that we belong with the gifts that we have and the skills that we have to create something that makes sense for us. I say that it's healthy for us, but that also you can see the results in the community that you care most about. We're not all built the same way. And this movement is an ecosystem, right? All parts are necessary, every joint supplying. So I think everybody's approach up here and that we've heard thus far in the audience is essential. It's that when we essentialize it and say, this is the way, this is the solution, that's when it gets dangerous.
But the love frequency thing, we're still calling about it like it's on some binary thing. I had to navigate through the very caustic, corrosive, abusive love that I was raised in and around. That's right. And like, as you were saying, the transformation to come around to the point where you can proudly say, I make sure I get a massage every 2 weeks, that taking self-care was demonized. It was about sacrificing the need for the strategy of survival. So that vibration of love, that frequency of love has a lot of discordant notes. And it takes a really long time to navigate through that, to stop doing that self-harm, to recognize how corrosive that is for when you are. Now I'm trying to spread love, and I'm still doing it with some of those frequencies that are really not okay anymore and not healthy.
I have to ask a question. Is that pure love, though?
No, but that's what I'm saying. But when you're a child,
that's a distortion of love.
when you're a child, how you have to navigate that, that's your family. You're told that that's love. It takes a long time to recognize that it isn't.
Another aspect of love, there's the unhealthy pieces of struggle and fight, and then there's healthy struggle, which is an important part of love. And anybody who's been in a meaningful relationship knows what healthy struggle is about, right? And let's, Nina Simone said it best: "Ain't nobody perfect 'cause ain't nobody free." And so we're all trying to navigate the decolonization of our imaginations, visioning the future. And for those of us who are trying to do this visioning of the future, like, we should be engaged in healthy struggle. And that healthy struggle doesn't have to be binary. It can be about, that is how the living world works. It works with interior and edge. Ecotone is like the edge, and that word tone means tension. And so the idea of it's tension of home. And you need that to create diversity, to create growth, to create new things and new ideas. And I think that's really important. So Charity Mahuna Hicks from Detroit called on us to wage love as a movement strategy. And it did not mean just hug everybody and tell your oppressor that they're still a human being. It was like fiercely fight for rights, be committed to the sacredness of our relationships to each other and to the living world, to honor all lives and all love. All of our peoples come from peoples, and our peoples, whose foundation of their worldview was the sacredness of their relationships to each other and to the living world upon which they depend.
People, overall, often think that organizers are the troublemakers, because we often have to radicalize shit because, our lives are on the line, right? And we have to do whatever we have to do in order to make shit happen. My title in the organization is CEO, right? And my definition of a CEO is community elevated officer, right? The community is the one who has uplifted me. I came to be later in life, right? And it was because the community. And so for me, it's important not to forget where I come from, right? And for me not to think that I am different, right? I think, you know, doing the work that we do, it's hard. If we are truly seeking liberation, the liberation of our people will only come as we walk together towards that liberation.
And when we can come together and share our ideas in this diverse space, and you at home too, and we can hear these different voices, these different experiences, these different perspectives, it's actually the only way that we're going to be able to collectively build a new future. So thank you all so much. Thanks to Bamby, Lee, Will.i.am, Gopal, Rosario, everyone here in the audience, and you at home. I'm just excited about the future we're going to create. You all have made us all optimistic and hopeful. You can check out more information about what these folks up here are doing.
Alicia
and Gopal. You can find more information about everyone that you saw today on theassemblytv.com. We love y'all. We're going to keep changing the world. I hope you change it with us. Peace.
How can we imagine and create a new world when the world we live in is not entirely visible to most of us? For many people, imagining a radical new future is near impossible because of invisible constructs of reality. For example, the American culture is rooted by a worldview called heteropatriarchy. It is the obsession with binaries: man over nature, men over women, white over black, parents over children. It is the systematic phrasing of men, maleness, and masculinity, and the subjugation of women, female bodies, femininity, and queerness. This form of thinking states that the heterosexual man and family is the norm, and everything else is other. Other becomes less than, and less than leads to indigenous genocide, rape, slavery, colonization, the Holocaust, capitalism, environmental injustices. This structure governs our culture, our bodies, our language, our actions, our interests, thoughts, and feelings. It governs pretty much everything, even down to our sex lives. So before we can create the future, we must ask questions, listen, name, and root out the silent oppressor. What ways have I experienced the effects of heteropatriarchy in my own life? Oh, okay, I gotta take my jacket off. Billing. I usually get paid significantly less than my male co-stars. The fear is that if a woman is billed first, then it will be deemed a chick flick, and therefore not worthy of people's time. Dressing. Do I sacrifice comfortability for safety? I don't want to feel like prey. It'd be nice if we could just kind of get over women's bodies in that way. Sexuality. I identify as a bisexual woman. There is a lot of pressure to appear as straight as possible because you're going to be more marketable. You're not going to lose your sex appeal. The most important thing for a woman is her sex appeal, apparently. Sweetie, baby, darling, sweetheart. It's Evan. Don't call me anything that you wouldn't want to hear another man call you in prison. We've been polite for too long, and if we can all just get a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable for a second, I think we'll make a lot of headway. There's a lot of pressure to conform, to be what's designated as normal. But who decided what's normal? Who decided that?
May I?
Yes, you may.
Awesome, thanks, Evan.
Yeah.
Really easy. See how easy that is?
She just asked, and I said yes, and
Not even a thing.
Fight for me, I'll fight for you. And we were cheering, stay.